It was summer of 1977, and camp season was about to begin for children across the United States. Camp Scott, located in northeastern Oklahoma in Mayes County, had been a retreat for Girl Scouts since 1928. Its 410 wooded acres could accommodate 140 campers and up to 30 staff members. A road nicknamed Cookie Trail led to 10 camping units scattered throughout the verdant beauty of the forest. In April of 1977, just 2 months before camp was about to start, a summer camp counselor attending a group training session discovered that an unknown person had broken into her cabin and had gone through her personal belongings. Strangely enough, the only thing missing was all of her donuts out of their box. In their place was a hastily scrawled note that read, in part, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in Tent 1. A fake body was also found hanging on the property. This incident and the accompanying note was disregarded as the message also made mention of Martians, and therefore the whole affair was seen as a prank. The management at Camp Scott made a decision many later called foolish when they failed to disclose the so-called prank to parents of the children slated to attend the upcoming summer sessions. Tent 1 stayed within the tent rotation and was assigned per the usual procedures. On Sunday, June 12, 1977, 3 young girls, Lori Lee Farmer, age 8, Michelle Heather Goose, age 9, and Doris Denise Milner, nicknamed Denise, age 10, bounded joyfully onto the bus that would take them along with 137 other campers to Camp Scott. The large group of preteen campers were set to spend a fun and eventful 2 weeks at the camp, but for 3 random girls, their trip would be tragically cut short. Upon arrival, the girls were all assigned campsites and tents. The camp was split into 10 different units, within which there were around 7 tents for campers as well as a counselor's tent. Each campsite had a Native American tribe's name, and Lori, Denise, and Michelle were assigned to the Kiowa campsite, Tent 8. There were 27 Girl Scouts in Kiowa unit, and they were split into 7 different tents. Tent number 8 was located on the edge of the campsite and geographically the farthest from the camp counselor's tent, which was some 150 yards away and hidden behind the forest's mass of trees and foliage. The trio was actually supposed to be a quartet, as a 4th girl was also set to be in Tent 8 that night, but due to a clerical error, she had been misassigned. The unnamed 4th girl was meant to be moved to Tent 8 that very evening, but due to an impending thunderstorm, the camp counselors decided to postpone the move, thus unknowingly saving that girl's life. At 7 p.m. the night of June 12th, the storm was in full force, but the girls were warm and happy, acquainting themselves over dinner in the dining tent. After eating, they, along with the rest of the brood, walked to their tents to retire for the night. That evening, after returning to their tent from dinner, the girls wrote letters to their families at home. 9-year-old Michelle writes, "Dear Aunt Karen, how are you? I am fine. I am writing from camp. We can't go outside because it is storming. Me and my tent mates are in the last tent in our unit. My tent mates are Denise Milner and Lori Farmer. My room is shades of purple. Love, Michelle." Lori writes to her family in part, "We're just getting ready to go to bed. It is 7:45. I couldn't wait to write. We're all writing letters now because there's nothing else to do." But it is perhaps Denise's letter that seems the most haunting, as she was already uneasy about her impending 2-week stay. "I don't like camp. It's awful," she writes. "Mom, I don't want to stay at camp for 2 weeks. I want to come home and see Cassie and everybody." These letters would be the last written words of these precious and innocent girls. Carla Wilhite, a university student working at the camp, later testified that around 1:30 a.m. in the early morning of June 13th, she heard what she described as guttural moaning sounds at a cross-section of trails leading towards the showers. She swept her flashlight across the campsite as the noise started up again, but, seeing nothing out of the usual, returned to her tent without alerting anybody else. She later explained that she assumed it was an animal and made the choice not to tell her coworkers because she thought they would be annoyed at having to walk through the cold, damp, dark forest and would think she was not up to the job of being a camp counselor. This choice, she says, would haunt her for the rest of her life. Others at the campsite that night later reported seeing a flashlight bobbing through the woods and also recalled hearing moaning or groaning sounds. At around 2 a.m., a girl in Tent 7 recalls the tent flap opening and a figure with a flashlight standing in the entryway. The girl was one of 4 campers in that tent and the only one awake at the time. She watched silently as the figure regarded the group for a second before closing the tent flap and walking off. The camper was confused and simply went back to sleep without alerting anyone. Between 2:30 and 3 a.m., a nearby landowner later reported hearing a great deal of automobile traffic on his remote road near the camp. At 3 a.m., a girl in a neighboring campsite, the Cherokee camp, heard a scream. She recalls looking at her watch and waking up another girl. They listened for more noises and upon hearing none, went back to sleep. At roughly the same time, another girl from another campsite says she heard screams and someone crying, "Mama, Mama." She, unsure of what to do, did nothing and went back to sleep. At 6 a.m. the next morning, Carla Wilhite, the same camp counselor who had heard the strange sounds in the night, was jogging the path towards the same cross-section of trails that led to the camp showers, which was the same location of the strange noises she had heard the night before. Under some trees, she spotted 3 sleeping bags. Thinking it was leftover luggage from the new campers, dropped off the day prior, she began to make her way towards it. Then she saw a body. It was the 10-year-old body of Doris Denise Milner. Carla's screams first alerted the other camp counselors to the gruesome scene, and quickly a crowd gathered. Upon seeing Denise, dead, beaten, bound, and partially nude, the counselors were too fearful to open the other 2 closed sleeping bags, and police didn't even realize that there were 3 victims until authorities arrived on scene, and a coroner opened the 2 zipped sleeping bags. Authorities would testify that the other 2 girls, Lori and Michelle, were both bound with elastic bands in their respective sleeping bags, both in fetal positions and wrapped in bloodied bed sheets. Both girls had died of blunt force trauma to the backs of their heads, seemingly while they were still sleeping inside the tent. Denise, however, detectives surmised, had been led away from the tent still alive. Evidence showed Denise was sexually assaulted and beaten so hard in the face that indentations of the weapon remained as post-mortem artifacts, although her cause of death is listed as strangulation. There was blood on the floor of the tent, indicating the girls had initially been attacked inside and then were carried outside. Evidence found on scene included a large flashlight, red in color, with a single fingerprint on the lens that, while able to be dusted, imaged, and scanned, never returned any matches in any state or federal databases. A footprint left in the pool of blood in the tent was also found, made by a male size 9.5 shoe. Along with these items, there was also a rope, duct tape, and a long black hair. Authorities began their tedious and emotionally charged investigation surrounding the camp with emergency vehicles. Parents were informed that something had gone wrong and that they would have to pick up their children at the council building. Parents of all 140 campers rightfully panicked and drove to the camp, creating a literal mile-long line of cars backing up into the entrance road, known as Cookie Trail, so named for the Girl Scouts' most famous annual endeavor. Frantic parents were turned away and forced to wait hours in the sun as the camp was put on lockdown. Terrified parents who saw the emergency vehicles and heard rumors were not told of their camper's status. The rest of the Girl Scouts themselves were not told that 3 of their campmates were dead. They were taken to participate in activities away from the campsite until the buses arrived to take them back to the Magic Empire Council in Tulsa. The camp was eventually evacuated entirely, and campers were released to their parents or guardians, with some being released without even their luggage, and all of them confused at the purpose of their trip being cut so short. June 13th would be the last day Camp Scott ever operated. The camp would close for good. The investigation went into full swing once the camp was cleared out. The following day, June 14th, detectives noted that it appeared the murderer had attempted to clean up the blood and smeared it around in the process. There was blood not only on the floor but also on the towels and the mattresses. The investigators soon learned about Jack Schroff, who owned a ranch near Camp Scott. At his home, black duct tape was found, as well as rope, which appeared identical to that which had been used to bind the wrists of 2 of the girls. However, Schroff claimed that his house had been broken into prior to the attack. Some items had been stolen from his cabin, but he could not name exactly what had been taken. Schroff took a polygraph and passed. He also had a solid alibi for the night of the murders and therefore was cleared as a suspect. Authorities then came up with a new suspect named Gene Leroy Hart. Gene Leroy Hart was a local Cherokee man. Raised just 1 mile from Camp Scott, he had been at large for 4 years, since 1973, when he escaped the Mays County Jail, of which he was an inmate for the crime of kidnapping and the subsequent rape of 2 pregnant women, as well as 4 counts of burglary. Although there is no direct evidence linking Hart to the crime, the sheriff in town, Weaver, said that he believed Hart was, quote, 1,000% guilty, but he did not elaborate as to why he believed that. Several days after the murders, some hunters discovered a cave which appeared inhabited. They found a number of items in the cave, including women's glasses, pages from the Tulsa newspaper, a section of which had been found in the battery compartment of the flashlight, possibly to keep the batteries from rattling around, and photographs that Hart himself had developed while working in the photo lab at the Granite Reformatory. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue found in the cave was a note written on the wall which read, 77-617. The real killer was here. Bye-bye, fools. Nearly 1 year after the crime, Hart was picked up at the home of a Cherokee man by the name of Pigeon and arrested on suspicion of the brutal assault and murders. Investigators searched the residence of Pigeon, but did not find anything related to the case. They searched again, and this time they found items that the camp counselor claimed had gone missing before camp began. Pigeon claimed these items were never there and that they had been planted in his home. There was also speculation that Sheriff Weaver actually had the photos which belonged to Hart in his desk at the Mays County Jail and planted them in the cave, therefore tying Hart to the case. Many family and area residents believed Hart was innocent. They raised money for his defense and supported him during his trial. A key piece of evidence was the long black hair, which was found on one of the victims. A state crime analyst said that although the hair matched Hart's hair, you could not identify a person based on hair alone at that time in 1977. The fingerprint on the flashlight lens did not match that of Hart. The bloody footprint in the tent was also too small to be Hart's. A jury eventually found Hart acquitted of all charges, and when they pronounced that verdict, Hart began openly sobbing with relief. He maintained his innocence. The not guilty verdict notwithstanding, Hart still had a 306-year state prison sentence for the crimes he was originally convicted of, as well as the successful prison escape. However, after just 2 months back in jail, Hart had a massive heart attack and died instantly at age 35. The parents of Doris Denise and Lori Farmer, but not those of Michelle, sued the Magic Empire Council of Girl Scouts for $5 million, alleging that the organization's administrators and the adults in charge were negligent. They included complaints regarding the threatening note left in the donut box 2 months prior to the tragedy, as well as the lack of adequate supervision of the campers and lack of follow-up in regards to the noises made that night. One of the campers who heard sounds in the night, though it is unclear which camper, says she told the camp counselor of these screams and was told to ignore them. In their defense, the camp counselors explained that first nights at camp are often filled with girls gleefully screeching and getting to know one another. In 2008, bodily fluids from inside the tent were put forward for DNA testing with more advanced forensic technology analysis. No answers came from this, however, due to the deterioration of the samples being too great. No other viable suspect ever surfaced, and the case remains open and unsolved to this day.